Hello, and welcome back to Drama After Dark, GBH's live drama after show where we unpack the latest masterpiece drama for you out there in TV land. Now, tonight, I am very delighted to be joined by two special guests. First, we have, in place of Andrea Willanen, the delightful Megan Smith, not in the field, this time as co-host. And we also have Peter Kadzis from WGBH News. Welcome to the show, guys.
Happy to be here.
Hello,
Thrilled.
hello.
I'm so glad to have you both. So before we get too started here, Peter, we would love for you to tell the folks at home a little bit about what you do at WGBH.
Well, simply put, I do politics. I suppose, my principal job is I edit most of the stuff from the State House and Boston City Hall. Then Adam Riley and I do a weekly podcast called The Scrum, which everyone can subscribe to.
Nice.
Plug. And then usually about once a week, Adam and I are on Morning Edition with Joe Matthews. So politics, and more politics.
Fantastic. So you're basically the perfect person to talk about the show Roadkill. Can you tell us a little bit about what goes into covering politics these days with the advances in, technology, the sort of unique political climate that we're in right now? How has that changed in the last, several years for you?
Well, social media has made just a tremendous change because anything can break at any time. I'll tell you, what's one of the biggest changes I've seen in my 40 plus years of doing politics has been since the pandemic. Ever since we've been locked down, politics has become very ritualistic. And I'm talking about Massachusetts politics and Boston politics.
Sure.
And we see the governor a couple of times a week. We see the mayor at least once a week. A lot of things are much more out in the open. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, because the legislature meets remotely, just as we're meeting here now, much more stuff happens behind closed doors. So it's this funny mix of much more openness and it's not secrecy, much more backroom dealing, if you would. It's, I'll tell you this, it's nothing like what we're seeing on Roadkill. And I think from my point of view, that's maybe too bad. But as a citizen, we do a much better job here at home.
That's good. That's good to hear. Now, speaking of, what we just witnessed on Roadkill, I think tonight's episode was particularly wild. So we're going to go into the speed recap, which tonight will be done by Megan, which is exciting. Now, Megan, is this your first speed recap, or have you done a speed recap before?
Jackie, this is my first speed recap, so bear with me.
Well,
why not? It's as good a time
excited
as any. Yeah, let's do it.
I believe in you. You've got this. All right, okay. So I've got the trusty rusty timer here. Are you ready? Are you prepared?
Okay, I'm ready. Yes.
Okay, and go.
Okay, so Prime Minister Ellison is experiencing her own but her email scandal as an unflattering email is leaked. Later, we find out that it's actually Julia who leaked the email, leading to her downfall. Finally, the meeting we've all been waiting for. Peter visits Rose in Shephold Prison, and they bond over Rose's experience as a bank robber. Later, Peter goes on live TV and admits that Rose exists, which actually kind of boosts his political prospects. We jump ahead at 8 weeks, and Peter's on the cusp of becoming prime minister, and everyone looks sad. And then the episode ends when Peter's wife refuses to sign the sketchy bank documents.
So close. You know what? I will give it to you because I think I flipped it a little soon, and also it's a notoriously hard challenge. I am very impressed. I think you got all of the big details, which is
yeah, there was a lot. I mean, there's so much to tie up in this episode. It's quite an epic episode.
It really was. I think we should talk about, what parts of this were our favorites because I think we won't be able to talk about it all. Let's see. I think for me, my favorite moment had to be that big TV interview where he totally drops that huge bombshell about his secret daughter. What did you guys think about that particular crazy moment?
That was unexpected. I didn't think he would do it. I don't know. What do you think, Peter?
No, I did. One of my favorite parts was when he's sitting down with the prime minister before he goes on television, and he sort of throws to her and says, well, this is about character. And she goes, yours or mine. And he basically says to her, well, because you're a moderate, predictable person, this is being held against you. I knew she was dead at that minute. No, I politically dead because I could see the knife coming out. But I've spent many years around people who stick knives in each other's back. So.
Oh, jeez.
No. Is that Massachusetts politics? Wow.
It also had a sort of vibe where when he says, like, you're predictable and I'm, the bad boy of British politics, it did sort of seem like he might be on the cusp of just, like, blowing up his own spot. And then in that, he's revealed the information. No one can use it against him because he chose the time to do it, which is, I think, a powerful choice in these situations.
Yeah.
Now,
just if Jackie, if I throw one word in here, the interesting thing about Peter Lawrence is he has goals or a goal to become prime minister, but he has no plans. He's very improvisational. He's a perfect 21st century politician because he's just riding the waves as they come along. At least he has been for 4 episodes.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Peter. It has a really fun vibe for him that he's just sort of always up for whatever might come his way, which I think is probably pretty, necessary in a social media world. Now, speaking of being ready for anything, what did we think about his interactions with Bella, Rose's mom, who we haven't really gotten that much screen time with before this episode?
I felt like there was a real, like, genuine connection there between them. I don't think Bella was receptive to it at this point, but I felt like between Peter and Bella and then Peter and Rose, there seemed to be like a real genuine connection, like a father-daughter chemistry I felt there, which I thought was really, I thought that was one of my favorite moments was Peter and Bella bonding and then Peter and Rose bonding in a really interesting way. The contrast of that family, those family moments to his other family moments are just so stark.
100%.
Yeah, you can see that whatever the initial attraction had been between Peter and Bella, the embers was still hot. I mean, she's a handsome woman. She's, as the French would say, a woman of a certain age, but she has this sort of sexy aura about her. And you could just tell she's a strong woman. I liked her a lot. She might be my favorite character. I mean, so far.
Yeah. I completely agree.
She said she wanted to be independent. That's why she never told Rose about him.
Yeah, it's such a powerful choice to make, especially if you think about what her life must have been like raising a kid all on her own. Like, she clearly doesn't have a lot of family money or anything. Just a really interesting character, and I wish we had had more time with her. Of course, those are our favorite moments, but we would love to hear what your favorite moments are out there in internet land. As always, you can tweet at us with the hashtag #DramaAfterDark right there. You can put the comment on Facebook, on Twitch, on YouTube, and our trusty social media producer, Zach, will snarfle those comments up and feed them to me on the trusty rusty social phone, which I will take a quick look at now to see if we have any messages from you out there in the internet. Let's see. Oh, we have a lot of really great tweets from during the show tonight. One of my favorites is from @SteveSpiffy, and it just says, "Trust no one," in all caps, which frankly is a very good choice for anyone on the Roadkill storyline. Don't trust anyone. You can't.
That's a good takeaway. Yeah, that's a good takeaway. They're all scheming. They're all self-interested, I think.
Yeah. Now, here's an interesting one that I think we all were maybe not expecting, but we talked about a little bit. At Angela Strafforder, I think I'm pronouncing that Twitter handle right, always a challenge on this show. He owned up to Rose and her situation. Well done, Peter, which I like that everyone seemed to be turning more to being in Peter's camp because of his relationship with his newly revealed daughter, which was kind of surprising, but kind of fun. So those are just a couple of the tweets we've seen. Please keep them coming. We'll keep looking for them. But first, if everyone's ready for it, we're going to go into the hot take debate, one of our favorite segments here on Drama After Dark. Now, our topic for tonight, folks, is Peter Lawrence a redeemable character? I would love to hear from you, Peter Kadzis, what you think. Is Peter redeemable, your name-sharing TV friend?
Yeah, by the way, it's really weird watching this and hearing Peter thrown around so much. It's too soon to tell. I think he's always been redeemable. He could go either way. It depends on circumstance. I think that's what makes this so powerful is we don't know. On the one hand, you see the way he has related to Rose. Even his complicated, or especially his complicated relationship with Helen, his wife, who ends the last episode clearly having the upper hand, or potentially the upper hand. But I would say too soon to tell.
Interesting. I like this take. Megan, do you have a counterpoint? Do you think it is soon enough that you have an opinion?
I do. I think he is redeemable because of what I was saying before. I saw a spark of humanity in this episode, mostly about Rose and Bella. I think that Rose was really getting to him, and when he was pushing for the prison reform this episode, I felt it. I felt like he was genuinely moved by Rose's experience. So, and I think a politician being ambitious and ego-driven is really nothing new. So I do feel like there's some it's in there. And I think Hugh Laurie has that mix of like charisma and mischievousness that really it's hard to tell, but I there's something there.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that.
That's totally fair. It's challenging that we're seeing this part played by Hugh Laurie, who is like the ultimate charming guy in a lot of the shows that he's in. Now, of course, because this is the hot take debate, I will take the third option here and say that I don't think he's redeemable. Even though I think you both made some really good points, I will argue that his insistence on the fact that the NHS needs to be privatized, as someone with a degree in public health, I have to condemn it. Like, no, the NHS should not be privatized. It is a bad idea, and it is part of the reason that our healthcare system in the United States is in such shambles. I also think that just in general, his reliance on working with these seedy, shady guys like Trevor and the other lobby boy, I cannot remember his name, the party chairman.
Adam.
Yeah. That's easy to remember now that we think about our coworkers. Yes, who is not a lobby boy. Adam is a delight. But if you're gonna work with these guys who it sounds like probably murdered Charmian, like let's put that on the table. I don't know. I think that you might get tarred with the same brush. That's my takeaway.
But Jackie, he claims to be a libertarian, so privatizing the NHS is totally in his lane, don't you think?
It is technically within his lane, but it's just a bad lane in this particular instance. I have to argue it.
That's fair.
Just a quick thing about Trevor and Adam. These guys are so far above the muck that they don't have to know what goes on. They have total deniability. They're playing a bigger game. And I would predict if there's a second season, we're going to see Peter in conflict with Trevor and Adam.
I hope so.
You'll have to have me back
to talk about it.
We'll
Yeah.
have to have you back to talk about it. It'll be too good. Well, and maybe we'll get Adam Riley to also join us for full name
Yes.
confusion, and we'll find someone named Trevor to really round out the group.
Peter versus Adam. That's what we got going.
I love it. It's perfect. Now, okay, so obviously we have some pretty strong feelings about Peter Lawrence and his redeemability. Of course, we would like to hear from you. Feel free to weigh in the comments. We will be keeping an eye out for them. Is this character someone we can trust? Now, I actually did see that we had one tweet in here that had some pretty strong feelings about Peter. This is from @LovableTrey, who says, Peter is one selfish fool and the women in his life just accept it, which, maybe not by the end of this episode.
Yeah.
We also have this, someone who's, I think, sort of in the Peter Katz's camp of being like, I don't know, he potentially, maybe, who is @PreciousHeaven7, who says, Peter is heartless and genius, very straightforward at first, but a jerk, a complex individual with a heart, but loving, nurturing, slightly overprotective, strict, and blatantly honest. He's got that character down, which, yeah,
Wow.
okay.
That's a lot of adjectives. I don't know if I agree with all of those.
It is. There's a lot
Is
happening.
he genius? Is he genius? I mean, what Peter Katzis was saying, that was a really good point, though. Like, he's not really going direct. There's no direction to what he's doing. Like, he comes out on top,
Sure.
but I don't know that he really has a plan there. I thought that was a really good point. I don't know.
Perhaps that is his genius. He's able to just sort of play the game and hop from
Or
thing to thing.
Or the chaos theory, where he just, they're talking about one thing, and then he's like, oh, I have a daughter, and then everyone talks about that.
Well, yeah. In that respect, he's like Boris Johnson, the current prime minister. Just a little bit crazy.
Now, we actually, it looks like, have a Twitter poll going over on the GBH Twitter. Please weigh in. We would love to see what you all think. You can vote on that. And we are going to go into our next segment, which I'm very excited about. This segment is called Mock or Doc. And yeah, so we're going to be talking about a list of political shows, and our resident expert, Peter Katzis, is going to weigh in whether they are more like a mockumentary, mock, or a documentary, doc, because we love, rhyming segment titles. So, Peter, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, so let's start off with a show that I think you actually mentioned earlier tonight in one of your tweets, The West Wing. Mock or doc?
Doc, definitely doc. It seems like a very naive show compared to Roadkill, but sure. I was addicted to it when it came out, and definitely a doc.
Love it. Okay, this is good. Now, next show.
That's good to hear. I'm glad. I mean, it's such a positive representation of politics compared to some of these, so that's good.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that for that exact same reason, Megan. Yep. And speaking of shows like that, our next one on the list is Veep. What do you think, Peter? Mock or doc?
Oh, mock, of course. Although, given the Trump administration, you could claim that Veep is a documentary, but no, it's definitely a mock. And it's funny you bring that up because on Thanksgiving, my 22-year-old son wants us to have a marathon starting with episode 1 of Veep. So definitely a mock.
That's an incredible way to spend Thanksgiving. And you'll see Hugh Laurie, he shows up in that show later.
If you get far enough in, right? You'll have to, I think he's not a few seasons, so.
Yeah.
It'll be a committed marathon viewing. Okay, so next on our list, the show Parks and Recreation. Mock or doc?
Yeah, that's a mock. I mean, it's a mock. It's I love it. It's a gentle mock. I mean, it's almost like Andy of Mayberry. Remember, I don't know if anyone out there is old enough to remember, Andy of Mayberry was Sheriff Taylor. But it's a very gentle show, but it's pretty funny.
It is. And it, I think, does get the small town thing down very well as someone who grew up in a town like that. But I hope that town meetings are a little less ridiculous than the ones that are portrayed on that show. Okay, next on our list. This one is a little darker. House of Cards, and I don't know if you've seen the UK version, the US version, but if you want to weigh in on one or both, we would love to hear your thoughts.
House of Cards is complicated. Um, it's I've got to say it's a documentary, but it's pretty wild. It's got a very subversive streak. Um, there are moments when it borders on mock, I think. Um, First of all, there just aren't that many politicians who are that sexually adventurous in Washington. Washington's a really conservative town. And all this stuff about reporters sleeping with their sources, I'm sure it's happened somewhere, but I just it's a nice, it's a nice, sexy outre storyline, but
Sure.
I don't buy it.
Mm.
Probably
I think
good,
you're right.
yes.
I think the marriage in that show is one of the most interesting parts. And I know you were just saying earlier that the marriage in this show is also really interesting.
Oh yeah, that I think is the thing that's really great about House of Cards is the interplay between the husband and wife. And Helen, I think, Peter's wife, Helen. I think if is going to emerge as a very powerful character. See, I don't see her as a wimpy person. I think she's very power conscious.
I think so too. I'm excited to see if we get a season 2, what she will pull. Okay, one more show before we talk about, this one, the show The Thick of It, which is a
That's
comedy.
wild and crazy. I mean, that's a mock. I mean, it's so insane. It's great.
Love it. Okay, and then last question. Obviously, we have to talk about Roadkill, which we just watched. Is this show more of a mock or a doc?
Oh, it's a doc. Although I might argue, politics is the surface. I think this show is about, upper class family life in England.
Hmm.
The tension between his daughters. It's easy to blame Peter for everything his daughters are, but how about his wife as well? Now, his wife is long suffering. My God, how could she live with this guy? But politics is the surface, but I think the guts of the show is family life.
Hmm.
Oh, I
Interesting.
wonder if we're
Yeah,
going to see if we're going to see Helen transform into a Claire Underwood type character. That's a really interesting potential plot line.
that would be a lot of
I mean,
fun to see.
she had that move at the end of this episode that was I thought pretty sneaky. So
And she played it so perfectly. Just that, like, insouciant, here are your papers, husband.
Yeah,
Do something with this.
and when she was at the posh restaurant with the barrister, when
Mm,
she basically said, "Hey, look, if I'm going to betray the man I've been with for over 30 years, it's not going to be because a sharp lawyer bought me lunch."
yeah.
That you know, she's playing for keeps.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, speaking of politics, we couldn't, of course, have you on the show, Peter, and not do our next segment, which we are calling hashtag BritPolly versus hashtag MaPolly, which is very hard to say, so I'm sorry about that. We, of course, wanted to talk a little bit about how British politics, and especially those that are portrayed on the show Roadkill, are in comparison to Massachusetts politics. So one of our first questions was, how would a libertarian like Peter fare in the Massachusetts political landscape? How would he fit in?
Well, I would say today, not at all. It would be inconceivable. But think back to when Bill Weld was governor.
Mm,
Um, Bill Weld, didn't have the morality problems, the right or wrong problems that Peter Lawrence had. But Bill Weld is someone who I think you could say, now, I never thought of this before. He had a goal to stay in power, but I'm not sure he really had a plan. He was very much a gamesman. I'd have to tell you, today, though, the sort of skullduggery, the dirty double dealing by the aides, who are truly the most reprehensible toads in the entire show. I'm talking about Julia, and what's the little runt who is Peter Duncan? Yeah.
Perfect description of him. He does not deserve more than the little
I knew
rat.
who you were talking. I knew who you were talking about.
I'll tell you, I haven't in years encountered anyone like that in Massachusetts politics. Especially at the moment, the people around the mayor, the people around the governor, the people around the Speaker of the House, the people around the Senate president are all fiercely loyal, which makes my job really difficult because no one will tell you nothing about nothing. It's all the party line. But in England, because it's a parliamentary system, things are much more fluid. There are more power centers. The parties, the Labour and Conservative, and the very small Liberal Party, they have much more influence than we see here in Massachusetts. And Massachusetts is, sort of like the old Soviet Union. It's all Democrats. I mean.
Now, in terms of, obviously we just watched a show where there is scandal after scandal after scandal. Is that sort of thing at all realistic? Have we had similar things happen here either in Massachusetts or, I guess in the US?
Well, sure. I mean, in Massachusetts, years ago, we're going way back. This is back when I was thin, when Kevin White was mayor of Boston. Kevin White sort of went from scandal to scandal to scandal, and he kept getting reelected and reelected and reelected. Look at the Trump administration. I mean, the Trump administration, I'm not sure we can call them all scandals because it depends on your point of view, but I think we could all agree that it's gone from outrage to outrage to outrage. And the Trump White House leaks like a sieve. I mean, there are all sorts of toads on every toadstool in the Trump administration. But the parliamentary nature of England makes things more fluid. The party is more important than the individual until you get to a much higher level.
Got it.
Peter, I'm curious. And Peter, as a member of the media, just quickly, how did you see the portrayal of the newspapers in Britain compared to how they are in the US?
Well, the press in England is the press in the UK is really vicious, and I would say fairly accurate. I would say fairly accurate. It was a great scene too, where I have to check my notes. The publisher. Gillian, when she came down from Scotland, most newspapers today, the Globe an exception, but we think of the newsroom as totally independent from ownership.
Sure.
In family-run newspapers, the newsroom is largely independent, but not totally. And that was a very, very good scene, the way she, in a very quiet, firm and forceful way, said, "Lay off, buddy." And she made it clear her job was on the line.
She really wielded her power so subtly. All she had to do was walk into the office and just say a few words, and that was it. I was surprised that he backed off so quickly, I guess, but what you're saying makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, when I was a kid, when I was in my early 20s working at the Globe, the Taylor family owned the Globe then. And whenever one of the Taylors walked into the newsroom, no one bowed and scraped, but it was pretty clear that the owners were there.
Wow. This is fascinating. Thank you so much for filling us in on all these things, Peter. That was really great, and I feel like I learned a lot, even more from just watching the show. But this was even more helpful. So we're gonna check out our comment of the day here, see if we have anything. But first, I wanted to update you guys on the results of the Twitter poll so far. As it stands right now, 60% of voters say that they think that Peter is completely unredeemable.
Oh.
And 40% say yes, he is a redeemable character, which is really interesting.
Interesting. That's the same split in the show. It was 60-40 after he released the news about his daughter, which surprised me. 60 was okay with it, I think, and 40 was against
true.
it. So.
That's actually really funny, Megan.
Good point. Very good point. Just a flip.
Yeah.
But
I love it.
That's true of a lot of politics. 3-2, 60-40. Nothing's certain.
And we also have one really great reply from at BAMAQ23 Bob, who has put this really wonderful gif from Schitt's Creek of the father saying, possibly. I don't know if this is going to show up at all on my screen, but agree, Bob, possibly. We don't know. All right, so let's go over to the old Slack channel and see if we've got anything delightful. I will go with this one for comment of the day. This is from Walt at Walt_Latham, who says, dang, I'll miss hearing that amazing Roadkill theme song every week, and I cannot agree more. Just delightful. And with that, I think we'll bid you all a good night. Thank you so much for joining us. We have had a great time covering Roadkill, and Drama After Dark will hopefully be back soon in front of your eyeballs. We will keep you posted on our social channels. And of course, I have to thank my wonderful co-host for the evening, Megan Smith, and our delightful guest, Peter Kadzis. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you. I feel like one of the cool kids.
Well, you have always been one of the cool kids.
What could be a better way to spend a Sunday night than with you guys talking about political shows? And I really mean that.
Good. Me too. Well, have a wonderful night, and we will see you all on the internet. Bye, everyone.